Titans is a show that didn't exactly, I don't think, start very well. Season 1 was not exactly what I hoped for. The villain, especially Trigon, who didn't really appear until the finale, was a really weak villain, which sucks because Trigon can be a very good villain. But also the finale itself, which it was a finale that was good, but it wasn't a good finale. It was just a good episode because it ended the season on a cliffhanger which resolved absolutely nothing. And I thought that there was no way they could ever make a finale that was worse than that, because while again it was a good episode, it was not a good finale. Here we have the exact opposite problem. This episode is technically a good finale when it comes to resolving all the storylines, but it is not a good episode whatsoever. There's one really cool, really exciting thing about it, but literally everything else is really bad, which is so disappointing because this season was going so well for so long. There were a couple episodes, especially near the end of the season now, that weren't exactly as strong, but there were so many great episodes before that, so many great storylines and characters. Deathstroke was a top-notch villain, so to see all that fall apart in the finale is one of the most disappointing television experiences of my entire life, next to Game of Thrones Season 8. But anyway, in this episode, I'll be reviewing this episode. In this review, I'll be reviewing this episode. I will talk about the positive things, which is mainly just Nightwing, and then everything else, which is all negative. With that in mind, let's begin the review for Titans Season 2's finale. This season has done a lot of building up when it comes to Dick Grayson becoming Nightwing. It's practically been the main focus of the season, and that's the one thing that they resolved very well. In this episode, Dick finally becomes Nightwing, not in the sense where he gets the name Nightwing, because they never actually mentioned that name, even though, I think they could have, especially when later in the episode and Bruce says that it's a far cry from Robin. Dick could have just said, yeah, it's Nightwing or something. That would have been cool, but anyway, still, the costume's awesome. Dick's newfound attitude is great. His embrace of his acrobatic ability is so awesome to watch, especially with the electric escrimas or however you pronounce it, that was added to his arsenal. Just seeing Nightwing is so cool, and that's something they did very well in this episode when it comes to resolving that storyline. So yeah, Nightwing was awesome. The scenes he was in was mostly awesome, when it was focusing on him. However, I don't think that was enough to make this episode good. It felt like they kind of relied on that a little bit too much, because they thought, that everyone's going to be excited for Dick becoming Nightwing, which is true, and then maybe they're not going to care about everything else, which is not true, because this episode, Nightwing is awesome, but like I said, literally everything else was absolutely not. Deathstroke was very disappointing in this episode. He's been the main villain of this season the entirety of the time. His motivation, while not exactly being 100% amazing, because Jericho is technically still alive, and even then, his death was mostly Slade's fault, and it's not like his judgment is being clouded by the Mirakuru like Slade on Arrow. However, he still was incredibly badass. His costume was awesome, and he definitely had a solid rivalry with Dick, which is why it's so disappointing that in this episode, he wasn't portrayed as the main villain. He was taken out in the first 10 minutes after, I will admit, a very good fight between Dick or Deathstroke and Nightwing, especially with Nightwing's big debut. That was certainly really cool. But then Rose shows up. Nightwing and Rose take on Deathstroke 2-on-1, and Rose kills him in the first, I think it was 10 minutes of this episode. The fact that Slade died, where it actually does seem like he is dead and he might not ever come back, is such a bummer. Out of all the villains in the DC universe, Deathstroke is certainly one of them that you should just never kill off. He's the only character, the only villain in the Arrowverse who never died. It's really him and the Reverse Flash, and that's basically it, because he's a villain that he can come back again and again. He could also be an anti-hero, an anti-villain, even a hero at times. He could have his own storylines. He doesn't need to die, and he never should. So the fact that they killed him off was definitely weird, but also the fact that they defeated him in the first 10 minutes of the finale, and he wasn't even the final villain. He's the main villain of the season, and they took him out so easily in the first 10 minutes, which is, I think, really weird. How Jericho survived this by going to Rose's mind is also a little bit weird. Honestly, I think what they should have done here with Jericho is have him maybe sacrifice his life to take out Slade. Maybe not kill Slade necessarily, but I do think that there should have been something there, because after Jericho's body died, it's a little bit weird for his mind to still be alive at this point. It worked for the most part for the storyline, but for now, going past that storyline, even though I like Jericho a lot, his powers are really cool, I don't think there's really any room for him. I mean, literally, there's no room for him. He doesn't have a body, so, like, I don't know where they're going with that, but most of what's happening here, other than the first fight between Deathstroke and Nightwing's big debut, was really, really weird because of how Deathstroke was defeated in the first 10 minutes, and how he wasn't really portrayed as the main villain in the finale of the season where he's the main villain. While Deathstroke was not portrayed as the main villains of this episode, Cadmus and Mercy Graves was. I'm not going to say Mercy Graves is a bad villain. In fact, she's definitely actually pretty good. This version of Mercy is most likely the best version in any continuity or any media ever because she's portrayed as more evil and more independent of Lex Luthor, and that definitely works a lot better. But also, in this episode, she's portrayed as the main villain, which just doesn't work. I mean, there's Deathstroke, the greatest Titans villain, probably my favorite DC villain overall, and then there's Mercy Graves. While this is probably the best version of Mercy Graves, it's just so weird and doesn't work whatsoever to portray her as the villain of this finale. But anyway, the Titans fight Connor and Rachel gets through to Gar. All of that was fine. I think it was a little bit weird how the Titans took on Connor one at a time and how Nightwing wasn't there. Like, where was he? He might have been contacting Bruce so that Bruce can hack Mercy Graves or something, but I don't feel like that would take very long. It was a little bit unusual what they were doing there. But anyway, Dick gets through to Connor, which actually was not bad, especially the shot where Connor flies, which I don't think is something he could do in real life. It's just how he's embracing more of his Superman side over his Lex Luthor side so that he can snap out of the control that Mercy has over him. Which also definitely mirrors Dick Grayson's embrace of his more light side with Nightwing, which all of that was definitely another part of the episode that worked for the most part. It was really that and Nightwing himself, but then Connor snaps out of it, defeats Mercy, and we move on to our third main villain of the episode. After Deathstroke, we move down to Mercy, and we move down yet again to a falling electric tower. These couple minutes in this episode are definitely the worst thing the show has ever given us. These are the most egregiously terrible couple minutes I've ever seen in a TV show that I thought got so much better, but these couple minutes are ridiculous. The audience, after the Titans defeat Mercy, start clapping for the Titans. The audience meaning the people in this carnival, which is weird because Superboy or Connor, or whoever this person is to these people, he was just fighting these people. How would they know that this person has been turned, and how do they know who the villains are? It doesn't make sense, especially with Beast Boy himself, a green tiger, which everybody knows now has been attacking people in San Francisco. Either way, even if it doesn't make sense, it was still really cringy. Even more cringy is when this girl said that her doll is over there and Dawn went to get it, which was, like I said, a very cringy moment. It wasn't terrible, it was just really, really, really weird and really cringy. But then we get to the next main villain of the episode, the only villain in this episode that kills anybody, this electric tower that falls, that's about to fall on Dawn, the child that she's giving the doll to, and all these other people. And while Superboy is right there, this would have been such a great moment for Superboy to redeem himself in the eyes of the public, to save this little girl and these other people and Dawn from this falling electric tower, so that everybody sees him doing this and everybody thinks that maybe what he was doing before, where he attacked those cops and is attacking these people right now, wasn't him. It would have been a great way to do that. Maybe even with Gar, like maybe he could have turned into a gorilla or something and held this tower up. Instead, they go to Donna Troy, even though, like I said, Connor was right there. He's faster than Donna, he's stronger than Donna, he is immune to electricity, so he could have done this. But then instead they go to Donna, she catches the tower, and from the electricity, she just dies. She's killed by an electric tower that's falling, not by any other villain, not by choosing to sacrifice herself for the greater good or something. It's just catching this electric tower and being electrocuted by it, when there are other people, like I said, Connor, who would have been way better equipped and faster reaction-wise to do this, it just doesn't make any sense, and it's such a stupid way to kill off a character. It's like they desperately wanted to make her leave the show. I don't know why. Maybe the actress wanted to leave. Maybe they're setting up a storyline where she becomes evil after coming back from the dead, which is apparently a storyline in the comics or something. Or maybe they just wanted to let her, they wanted her to leave because she has expensive powers, and maybe they're using Connor instead when it comes to those powers, which their powers are definitely a little bit similar. But anyway, it's just either whatever one of those reasons is, it's a terrible death scene in this episode, and I don't know how Themyscirians work in this universe, but I don't think that amount of electricity would kill any of them, or at least not the Wonder Woman level one, and I'm pretty sure they mentioned before that Wonder Girl is just as powerful, or at least maybe a little bit less powerful than Wonder Woman, so I don't think this would kill her, especially since she just fought Superboy, and she was unscathed by that. So yeah, this was a god-awful death scene, and it was probably the worst moment in this show ever. Not to mention that the Wonder Girl is honestly one of my favorite characters on the show. In terms of the Titans themselves, it's just Dick, Jason, and Connor that I like more than her. She's, I think, one of my favorite characters. Because of that, I'm really angry at this death that didn't mean anything. It was a pointless death, getting rid of a great character for no reason. Not only that, but this death was not emotional in the slightest, which it should have been, because like I said, she's one of my favorite characters on this show, and her death should have been emotional. But this show has a huge problem when it comes to the death scenes. The way they edit it, they cut from the character dying to another scene where characters are talking about that or grieving that, or at the funeral or something, instead of focusing on that death in the moment. That's always the most emotional part of any death scene, when they focus on the characters who care about that character's reaction, the sudden shock of that person being dead. Instead, they show Dick rushing over to Donna and hugging her or something and holding her in his arms, but it doesn't show his reaction at all. We get nothing from him. I think that would have made it so much more emotional. This was true for Aqualad's death this season. This was true for Jericho's death this season. In the initial episode, we did get another extended version of that where Deathstroke reacts to that, and then Jericho goes into his mind, which should have most of that should have happened in the actual episode to make that death emotional. Instead, these deaths, not a single one of them were emotional, even though all three of these characters, Aqualad, Jericho, and Wonder Girl, were very good characters. Like for Jericho and Aqualad, they were only in one episode when they died, but for Wonder Girl, the fact that she was in the entirety of the season and a couple episodes in the last season, and she was one of my favorite characters on the show, and she died, and it wasn't emotional, and the fact that she should have died, it was so bad what they did here, and it really was, I think, definitely the most egregious part of this episode, which is saying a lot because Deathstroke was defeated in the first 10 minutes, and there was a lot of stupid moments. At Donna's funeral, Rachel leaves to Themyscira, and this is definitely where maybe the evil Donna Troy could come in, which I'm guessing is going to be called Troya or something. Rachel reviving Donna could definitely make her evil because Rachel's powers are rooted in evil for the most part, but that definitely was interesting. If this actually means that Rachel is gone, I'm okay with that, because while Donna was certainly one of my favorite characters on the show, Rachel has got to be the worst character. She never does anything. I don't think the actress is very good, and her storyline after Trigon died is nothing. There's nothing there other than her losing control of her powers, which is just not as interesting as it could be. So if this is actually Rachel leaving to Themyscira forever and never coming back, I honestly don't have a problem with that. But also, if she revives Donna, I don't have a problem with that either, because I do think that could be interesting, even though the way they went about killing her was not good at all. Anyway, also in this funeral, Jason had his single scene, which based off his storyline certainly made sense, but at the same time, I don't know, it would have been cool to see a little bit more of him in this episode, but there is certainly some tension building up between him and the Titans, where he can maybe become Red Hood without dying, which I'm not exactly a fan of. Him dying and then coming back from the dead is a huge part of his storyline as the Red Hood, so I really hope they don't skip over that, especially with the Joker. The episode does end in a pretty cool looking scene. Actually, no, there's a scene after that, but the ending of the episode with the Titans team up shot, you got Nightwing, Hawk, Dove, Starfire, Beast Boy, Superboy, Ravager, and Crypto. It's actually a pretty cool looking team up shot. However, it's one of the like 3 good things in this episode. Like I said, this shot, the Connor scene where he's flying, and Nightwing himself. 2 of those things are just one shot, one scene, so it's really just Nightwing himself, his costume, his new attitude, the way he fights now. That's the only good thing about this episode. The Donna Troy death, the way they use Deathstroke and Mercy Graves, it's all really weird, and it doesn't make any sense to me that they went this route. They could have had such a great finale. It could have started with Dick Grayson heroically coming back, stopping Mercy Graves, and helping Superboy and Connor come back and get out of Mercy Graves' control, and then the Titans all team up against Deathstroke with their huge roster. The Deathstroke would probably not be very much of a challenge, but maybe Deathstroke could have like laid some traps for them, so then it ends up just being Nightwing versus Deathstroke, and then Nightwing wins. It's such a simple formula. It's such a simple thing they could have done. Instead, they made Deathstroke being taken out in the first 10 minutes. They killed off a character that they should not have killed off ever, and also in the stupidest way possible. And this just makes a finale that's so disappointing. The ending where the Blackfire shows up, it really shows, to me at least, how I don't think I'm as interested in this show as I was going into season 2. This season had, Bruce Wayne, Deathstroke, Aqualad, Jericho, and all these characters being introduced, even Superboy, and yet they didn't really pull it off for the most part. Like the finale, the fact that it was so bad, it really ruins a big portion of this show. The ending of something, I think, is always the most important, which is why after Game of Thrones Season 8, the second time I'm mentioning it in this review, I couldn't really care less about Game of Thrones anymore. The ending is definitely, I think, the most important part, so this episode has at least partially ruined this whole season for me, and because of that, the fact that the next season won't even have Deathstroke, which, like I said, not only my favorite Titans villain, but probably my favorite DC villain ever, and also no Aqualad and no introduction to Superboy, and Bruce Wayne probably I don't think will have as big a role. I don't think the next season will be nearly as good, unless it like majorly focuses on Jason Todd becoming the Red Hood, and maybe Wally and Roy come and appear. Blackfire is just not an appealing villain compared to Deathstroke. So after this episode, I do think my enthusiasm about the show has depleted quite a lot, and I think this episode definitely is to blame for that. But anyway, I won't give this episode a score because I don't really think I can give it a score. I don't necessarily hate it, but at the same time, like I said, it killed my enthusiasm for this show for the most part for now, so I'm not going to give it a score, but let me know what you thought about it in the comments down below, and if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.